A nest box attack, Biddy laying her eggs, and indeed seeing that egg for the first time, all with a rival bird trying to destroy the nest to make it her own. You guys are in for a good one. And indeed, welcome to the 2022 nesting season, or welcome back if you've been watching previously. We left the last video on a little bit of a cliffhanger, and we have Biddy laying her first egg. We don't actually see it on this day on the 17th, but we do see it on tomorrow, the 18th of April, which those are 2 days that we're covering in this video. And we see Biddy here doing some heavy breathing. Now, we've seen this in past years, and it's a telltale sign that an egg is on its way, or indeed being laid. And if this is your first time visiting the channel, welcome, and be sure to check out the channel, check out the playlist where you can follow this story from when Biddy first started making her nest. So have a nosy, leave a comment, and if you feel so inclined, please subscribe. So now back to Biddy. On the 17th, we see that she woke up at around 6:30, heavy breathing, and is pretty much in labour. She is laying her very first egg, and what a privilege it is to see such things. I personally will never tire of seeing this little insight into a world where, for years, we were just not privileged to see, and thanks to modern technology, we now have an insight into their world. So now we see Biddy has laid her egg and is start fixing the nest in preparation on leaving. She starts tidying up, and you can see when she leaves white feathers over the nest cup. She does come back a little while later, however, and she has a bit of a nap, and this is something we're going to see in the coming days. When she lays her eggs, she tends to have a few naps throughout the day, and you can see her there doing her shuffle off the nest, kicking back feathers as she does over the nest cup to protect those eggs from any predators that may lurk in the hole, which we do have a visit in this episode, so keep watching. So after a little nap, Biddy decides to leave, but she really doesn't leave for too long. 10 minutes later, she's right back and is still looking quite tired. That egg laying must have taken a lot out of poor old Biddy, and you have to remember, Biddy is a 3-year-old bird at this stage. We've followed her story the last 2 years prior to this, where both of her broods were unsuccessful nesting attempts. Will this year be different? Well, we're just going to have to wait and see. Biddy leaves again and comes back in an hour, and unfortunately got caught in a shower. Look at her, she's absolutely saturated, the poor thing. And she hops in at around 9 o'clock to wait out this shower in her nice cozy nest that she has made. Still looking quite sleepy there, with her closing her eyes every so often. So if you've been following the story so far, you know that we have a rival pair of blue tits showing huge interest in the nest, and we know now that there is an egg in this nest, as we saw the egg laying behaviour just this morning. And we see here the male blue tit of the rival pair. How do I know it's the male? Well, this behaviour now. We see the male hunkering down in a corner and leaving as the female comes in. It's a standard nesting behaviour that we see throughout the year, and it's always or generally the male that hops in first, hunkers down, and lets the female come in. But just look at this. This is the rival female bringing in some nesting material into Biddy's nest. This is big moves by this rival bird, that this bird is really thinking of nesting here. She is starting to decorating the place. Imagine that, someone slowly moving into your home and bringing in their decorations as they do so. Of course, I say that in jest. I'm only just putting human emotions to these little birds. This rival pair, which I think is Mindy and Mork that I followed last year in another nest box, are just desperate to find a place to nest. My heart really goes out to them at this stage, but just look, she is starting to do nesting shuffles in the nest cup that we know that there is an egg in there. And just like in the previous videos, Mindy's nest and shuffles compared to Biddy's seems to really disrupt this nest, as they obviously have different building styles. Biddy comes back a little bit later and starts restoring the nest, and just look, she seems to be pulling feathers up from below. This would mean that she has feathers down with that egg to try to protect it, and indeed to try to camouflage it, so at least it has some protection down there when Mindy, the rival bird, is in doing her nesting shuffles. And that brings us on to the 18th. Now, a lot happens on this day. It could have been an episode in itself, if I'm honest. But do we have some egg-laying behaviour? Well, we don't see the heavy breathing with it open, but we can see her taking breaths there, certainly. And then look, that looks like a push to me. But she also freezes in this position for quite a few minutes. So much so that the camera actually knocks off recording as nothing's moving, and it only records when it moves. So later on, I believe we have a second egg laid in this nest. Biddy looking particularly proud of herself there, and why wouldn't she? So she decides to stay in the nest for quite a bit. You can see the clock has jumped to 7:30 and she is still there, but just look at her demeanour. She hears something in the tree that the next nest box is situated in, and indeed something is approaching. She has sensed it, and look at her shrink up in the nest cup. She is certainly looking worried. And yes, the starling is back, and Biddy is indeed in the nest this time, as we can see, and indeed if you look closely, you can see her egg is in the nest also. Has the starling seen that egg? Who knows? That's the blue tit's defense mechanism, make a scary noise and flap and slap their wings closed, making themselves look bigger and threatening and loud. But will it do the trick? And thankfully the starling seems to have given up its pursuit. Biddy seems to have successfully defended the nest. Now the starling is only able to poke its head in the hole, but if there's chicks in there reaching up, contact could be made. And indeed, look, we can see Biddy's egg. So in Biddy's mind, there was a lot at risk at that interaction, but she stood her ground and defended her nest quite strongly, I may say. So you may think Biddy's troubles are over for the 18th of April. Well, sadly, you would be wrong. The rival pair pick today of all days to start showing more interest than ever in this nest. But we will get to that, and we are looking at the aftermath of that starling's visit off the nest box. It takes a while for Biddy to settle, but eventually she does, and eventually she decides to leave. She does her shuffle to throw feathers back over the nest cup, and off she goes. Only to come back 8 minutes later to have a nap. I suppose it was a bit of a hectic morning. But eventually, about 10 minutes later, she decides to leave. And just look, not 8 minutes later, the rival pair arrive. This is not the first time they've done this. I really do wonder, are they sitting and waiting for this nest to be absent to sneak in and have a nosy? So the rival bird Mindy must know that there's an egg in this nest at the moment. And that begs the question, how would she treat another bird's egg? Well, I've never heard or seen of a other bird going out of their way to destroy an egg, but they will certainly have no love for it. And we can see them visiting quite a bit right up until 9:30, until Mindy comes back with a little bit of nesting material and reshapes the nest. I really wonder, does she have any idea that the rival pair is showing so much interest in her nest? But it doesn't stop our Biddy having a little nap at 9:30. And she has a nap for about 10 minutes or so, and we're seeing her do this more and more, and we will see it more and more with the eggs being laid. And just look, at 11:30 Biddy hasn't came back, and that has caused an opening for the rival birds to arrive in, and Mindy, the rival female, wastes no time in starting to do some nesting shuffles in the nest. So will her nesting shuffles damage that egg? Well, to be quite honest, I don't know. It's quite an unusual situation, this. Par the claws in her feet, I can't imagine that her body would crush that egg in there. We can just see a glimpse of it there. But it certainly wouldn't stop it being buried down into the nest. The rival bird Mindy actually gets stuck in the nest here, just momentarily. Thankfully, there was no rescue needed. You'll see she comes down, does a spin, and unhoops herself. And these visits by the rival pair continue to go so right up until around 20 to 1, when Biddy decides to come back with a little feather to top off her nest with. She looks around almost to think, I could have sworn I left this place spotless when I left. Maybe that Miley has been in mucking around. So she does her little shuffle out and heads off for quite a few hours. You can see at 20 to 2, the rival pair is back, and there's been no visits since Biddy left. And I must say, Mindy, the rival bird here, is quite a pretty bird. She has a smoother complexion than Biddy, and that's often how I can tell the difference pretty easily. The only problem is, however, that she is in Biddy's nest, and I am very, very biased towards Biddy, as I've been following her story for the last 3 years. And while I'm naming the new pair Mindy and Mork, as I followed a very similar pair last year, I don't know for sure they are, but something happens down the line that lets me know that it just might be them. But that's a video for another day. And the camera unfortunately turned off for just a couple of hours there, and when it turned back on, we can see that the nest is really being put out of shape by all these unwanted visits by the rival birds. The male of the rival birds does keep very good tabs on the female while he messes up Biddy's nest, probably keeping watch for the occupants in case they come back. And we can really see the nest is being made a mess of, and I can only think where that egg is right now. Has it been pushed down? Has it been tossed to the side? I really don't know. Our poor Biddy just seems to not be able to catch a break at all. First, the starling disrupts her sleeping and attempts to rob her of her 1 or 2 eggs, and now Mindy is making a mess of her new home, trying to make it hers in doing so. If you remember from last year's videos of Mindy and Mork's nest, her nest cup was quite a deep nest cup, so maybe that's what she's trying to replicate here, and maybe Biddy's nest isn't like that. Maybe she has a shallower nest than Mindy. So maybe they're the differences that we're seeing here. This is only speculation on my behalf, but it's just my own thoughts. But one thing I do know, that it is really making a mess of the nest. And so how will Biddy react coming home to this? Well, here she is hopping in at around 10 to 8. This is the time she usually comes in to sleep for the night. And just look, I don't know if she notices, I don't know if they're capable of noticing these things, who knows, but she certainly knows she has to fix it, and she does look a little bit perplexed about what's going on as she goes straight into nesting shuffles and trying to fix the nest. And also we can see straight away that her nesting shuffles doesn't seem to be pushing the material up the walls like the rival female Mindy was. And so for the next 20 minutes, Biddy tries to settle in a nest that has been made a mess of. So what will the following days bring? Well, as I always say, only time will tell. Thank you very much for watching the video with me, and we will see you in the next one. If you're so inclined, please do subscribe. It means a lot to me. Thank you very much. Bye bye.